Good morning, everyone. My name's Hank Suttala,
And I'm Dr. K.
and our special guest, Don Zane Curfman, here to talk all about. We're going to be talking about breathing and how it is an amazing tool that is always with you, no matter where you are in life. So,
Absolutely. Good to be here.
oh, right. So, Dr. K, why don't we start with? Well, Zane is more going to be focused on some of the kind of more esoteric concepts, just from a physiological part. Why is the breath, or what does the breath really do in terms of helping our whole physiology, our brain, and all that?
Oh, there's lots there. So it creates a cascade when you're holding your breath, which we find that we do very often. And one thing I want people to recognize when you're working on the computer, when you're at work, especially when something catches you, catch yourself because we don't even realize how often we are holding our breath. And then when you're like, you've been holding your breath that whole time. When you're holding your breath, you are accumulating more CO2 in your body. That's causing acidity. When there's more acidity in your body, you have a cascade of biochemical reactions that start to happen within your system. And that's, I'm not going to get into biochemistry because it gets confusing. But, well, nobody would understand the terms. But that's the biggest takeaway is breathing and relaxation. You can do so much within your system just by getting a good breathing technique. And I'm sure Zane will go over that belly in, belly out, all these little details. Doing it the right way and conditioning yourself to do it the right way versus going through your day of like, and there's a lot of exercising ways to, when you exercise and you feel like you can't catch your breath, there's a very little simple technique that I'll go over maybe later after we all kind of get our spiel in that you can do if you're exercising and you feel like you're out of breath. You can catch, there's a little technique you can do to catch your breath. But oxygen, it's the one thing I'm sure we'll all agree on. We need oxygen. What if we had to pay for oxygen? Can you imagine like what the world would be? And people that have emphysema and people that have COPD, congestive obstructive pulmonary disease, sometimes even a coronary artery disease that involves the lungs. You guys know what it's like when you cannot catch your breath and what a gift that is. And we can't take a few steps forward because you're out of breath already because your lungs and your heart work together. And when they're not working right, woo, it is just, that's the challenge. So that's a question I have for you, Zane. We'll challenge you. What do we do with people, patients, clients that have these conditions where they may not be able to take that, I'm sure all of us have a different breathing technique. I do a 6 to 3 breathing technique that grounds you. But what do those folks do? So that might be an interesting thing we can chat on when you can't take that
Absolutely.
Yeah.
full
Yeah, yeah.
breath.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like my
Absolutely.
mom has that too. Like, so she would have a hard time going through a breathing exercise. So I guess you have to kind of meet people where they're at. But what would you say to that? Because there's some people that may really want to start with a breath
Exactly.
practice, but because of their physical fitness or condition, they might find that very intimidating or not even possible in their mind.
Exactly. And that's,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. One of the breaths that I promote the most is a circular breath. So a circular breath doesn't have to have a lot of intensity with it. The biggest thing about it is to remember to put the emphasis on the inhale. So you would just inhale normally to whatever depth you can, then exhale, and then start to inhale again before the exhalation has ended. And you can do this very slowly, and that's what I would, and very gently. That's what I would tell to people who don't have a larger capacity to breathe. Part of the breathing exercises that I've been taught is it's a way of centering your consciousness. So when the consciousness and the breath are centered together, miraculous things happen in the body and to our own awareness. So it's not really how fast or how strong you can breathe. There's other breathing techniques, where there's holds and breaths and things like that. But a simple circular breath, which can be taught to almost anyone. And it's a natural way of breathing. Infants, when they're first born, they're actually breathing in a circular breath. So it's very natural and very comfortable once we learn to do it.
Awesome. And out of curiosity, Zane, I've worked with Zane for many, many years, and I've had breath work before in some meditation classes. But some of the techniques that you had, I'm just curious, like, how did you first stumble across breath? And it's clear that it's incorporated into everything that you do. But where are the origins, and how did you come to find that it was so important?
Well, of course, everything is spiritual in my life. That's where the origins of everything came. And while I was studying, especially in the Andes and in the Afro-Caribbean tradition of Sanse, there is always a breath technique with almost everything that you do. And then as I was able to reach out to other people and other medicine paths, I found that that there are different breathing techniques that create different states of consciousness. And I was really turned on by this because this means that we can actually it's a little confusing sometimes, but we can actually take control of our chemical supply of our body and our brain. And we can do that through conscious breathing. And we can then drive ourselves into different states of consciousness. So, because of the power of that, it led me to want to research and explore it even further. And then I had a good friend, Joe Filder, who was college roommates with a guy named Jim Leonard, who was part of the 1970s rebirthing movement with Leonard Orr, and then later went on to create something called Vivation breath work. So I got to get a like treasure trove of breathing techniques from him as well.
That's amazing. And I had a question, then I went poof. That happens a lot on the show. Like, oh, there's my thought. But so instead, let me invite anybody who's watching. If you have a particular question for Zane, you can certainly make it in the comments, and we can address those. Um, I'll share something from my own breathing experience. When I first started getting into meditation, um, they would always say, like, pick something to anchor yourself. So that the idea is like Pavlov's dog, that whenever you have a subject to a stimulus, you can instantly go to the state even if you're not doing the exercise. And it's just like when they bring the tuning fork and then feed the dog, eventually they could bring the tuning fork, the dog would still salivate even if they didn't feed the dog. So that's the idea. And what I chose was the breath, partly because of this quote from a teacher of mine named Barbara Sanson, who said the breath is the first and last possession you'll ever have in this life. It is the most important thing to note, develop, and be with. And so for my breathing practice or a meditation practice, I would simply take 3 deep breaths right before I went into meditation. And what I find now to this day, if I get knocked off center, 3 deep breaths, and that takes me back to a meditative state. So the breath could also be used to do anchoring for a lot of different things, I would presume.
Absolutely. And one of the nice things is it's inherent to us. It's not something we have to go out of our way for. Some of the states that we can enter in through breathing are exactly the same type of states that substances such as ayahuasca or San Pedro introduce us to, because we are actually changing our brain chemistry. We're moving ourselves from the limbic brain more up into the neocortex, where we can access deeper levels of compassion. We can access intuition and creativity and all these things that we see as being part of the spiritual life. They actually are kind of encoded in parts of our brain. And when we can use that as a trigger to enter into those states, I mean, that's something that we own. That's something that no one else can provide for us. It's not something you have to pay for. It's something that is absolutely free and inherent part of yourself.
Awesome. What question do I want to ask next? Going back to Dr. K, I'm curious, like when people first come to see you, do you incorporate breath work to a lot of your clients as well?
Absolutely. The grounding, I intertwine the grounding and a breath with it because it's the one thing, let's face it, we all have stress right now. Everybody's just in so many different directions. So it's one of the very first things I teach is a grounding technique and a breath work intertwined in that because we're often way out here somewhere, and when we're way out here, that's when illness can creep in. When these just things just we get sick because we're always somewhere else. We forget things. We don't know where we put our purse. We don't know where we put our keys. We run out the door. We forgot to turn the stove off. That means you're ungrounded. And the way to get back into front and center is breathing and grounding. And so these are one of the basic things. And when you're breathing, you obviously, or when you're holding your breath, should I say, you're increasing more CO2. That's causing acidity in the body. We don't want the acidity in the body. That's a state of, again, you're opening the door for illness to come in. And we're all so tightly wound right now, waiting on the edge of our seats, that breathing will relax you. It's one of just the basic things I can tell people is breathing helps to relax you, and you don't need a pill, you don't need anything for that. It's just a very simple thing, and if you can make it a routine, at first people are like, and I was like that too. I'm like, I don't have time for this. But you realize when you start to say, okay, all right, I'm going to do this for 30 days, just do it for 30 days, do the grounding, do the breathing, you'll start to find that as you do this repetitively through the day, you're like, oh, I'm a little calmer, I'm a little better, maybe it's working. So yes, that is definitely one of the very first things that I teach people: awareness and grounding and breathing.
No, there's this one
Yeah.
passage. Oh, go ahead, Zane. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, like she was talking about when you are holding your breath, that's a constriction. And in breath work, especially, we notice that when you're holding your breath, that you're basically tapping, in a way, an imprint, something that was imprinted in you that causes a trauma, something from your past, something where you're feeling insecure. And so when you can become conscious of those moments when you're holding your breath and you can make yourself start breathing through it, you actually start to lessen the constriction or the hold that that particular event has on you. You're actually accessing your muscle memory and trauma on a cellular level.
Awesome. And what I was going to offer is there's this one passage um, in the Bible where God, or I think Christ after the transfiguration said, I have food you know not of. And I know with a lot of breath work too, there's not just a focus on the breath, but you also turn your attention to what they would call prana, or the actual life force energy that's around us. And it's always there and you're always getting it with you breathe. But when you start to intend to receive it, I think it kind of shifts the experience that you can have around with breathing. Is there anything you could speak to that a little bit about?
Oh
Either of
yeah,
you.
for sure. I would love to. I mean, in a little bit, if you all would be open to it, I would even like to maybe do like 5 minutes of breathing just to help illustrate that point.
Oh, absolutely. That would be great.
Yeah.
Cool. And for those, let's see. Well, this is kind of on topic too. Mark is normally our comedian and offers all kinds of little funny things, but he's asking about snoring because when we, of course, breathing is occurring when we're not conscious. And if people have snoring or sleep apnea, how could that affect, or are there breathing techniques that might be able to help someone move into a space where they're not snoring or having that kind of unhealthy experiences while they sleep?
I don't know how you can comment on that, Zane. I would say that's a challenge when you're not conscious. It's tough to be conscious of your breath. But to answer Mark's question, yes, it is unhealthy. Often when you're snoring, a few things are happening. The primary thing that happens is your tongue rolls back to kind of close your opening, where your, should I say, your nasal passage and all these, your oral organs then just, your tongue goes back when you're laying backwards. And a lot of times it's people that have a larger tongue or, have weight issues. Sometimes not even a weight issue. It's just an oral issue. And then you obviously, and then your epiglottis then can't mitigate the breath. So when you're sleeping and you're snoring, a lot of times that's what's happening. Your body's like, it's trying to get the breath and it can't. So just a little bit's getting in there. And this is a lot of times when people get on the CPAP machine to help get that oxygen, because it can cause things like fatigue, obviously increase of CO2 because you're not getting the breath. So all in all, that is something, that you want to look at
Yeah.
because it's not benefiting you.
Well, but I'm curious. Is there ways that, like, through a practice of breath work, could, because I know, for example, playing a didgeridoo helps to like build these muscles in the throat that can then, in some, they did a study where they were able to take a group of people that snored or had sleep apnea, and through them practicing a dish, they saw a reduction in the severity. So I'm curious if there's other breath works or other techniques that might strengthen that, because if you don't have restful sleep, it prevents you from going into different states of consciousness, and that could have a huge impact and short term to long term memory. So to you, Zane, I'm just curious: is there any breath work or techniques that might lead into strengthening that, or being able to have a more restful breathing when you're unconscious?
Well, the only thing I can really state in that is the guy who I was talking about before, Joe, he does snore at night sometimes. And when he gets very deep into breath work, the same mechanism starts to play because you're getting so relaxed, you're getting into that same type of state, but you're still conscious. So I'm not 100% sure about it, but perhaps by that happening while he's in a conscious state, he could work on finding ways to create a habit of breathing differently. But since you're not conscious when you're sleeping, it would be difficult. I don't know any breath work technique that helps with snoring.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Fair
can't
enough.
comment on that either. That's not my sleep apnea and snoring are not my specialties. But I would definitely recommend then doing it throughout the day because you're definitely not getting it at night.
Yep.
Yeah.
Propping a pillow up, that's always just a common thing to do so that your tongue isn't allowed to completely, so don't be completely flat. Maybe prop yourself up on a little bit of a pillow so that your tongue is not allowed to close off the whole epiglottal area. So that would be a simple recommendation, but I will have to research that a bit more.
Yeah, or get the dish. That research study was showing very promising results. So if you got a little didgeridoo, you could annoy your neighbors and get healthy at the same time. We have another question from Andrea. Can you use breath work to relax and stimulate certain areas of the body, such as the colon, to help with constipation?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to agree that all of that will help. There's different factors that come into play there, but yes, when you're constricted and you're tense and you're nervous, it's very likely you'll get constipation or diarrhea, one of the two. So I'll let Zane comment on the rest.
Also, when you're doing deep belly breathing, one of the things that's happening is you're giving yourself an internal massage. So all of these organs of the gut are actually being massaged. They're being toned by the breath itself. So that helps to relieve some of these conditions. Of course, anything like this is multi-tiered. You can't just, you don't just work with breath alone. You're going to work with your diet. You're going to work with other things to help stimulate this more.
Yeah, and one thing, since I'm the sound guy, that you could easily do to incorporate while you're doing a breathing exercise, there's two frequencies. One is C256 and the other is G384. It creates a combination called the perfect fifth, which has been shown to be good for balancing the nervous system and also creating these little still points in your body that cause like a response called puffing, which is a release of nitric oxide, which helps with circulation, it helps with tension, it helps with inflammation and all that. So you could even like have a little practice of sound while you're doing your breathing exercise, and by adding that sound you're going to even, you know, amplify the effects of how it would benefit the organs and the different states of the body and all that good stuff. One quick reminder for everyone, continue to ask questions. This is great. We love that. All the links that are going to be relevant for today's show, I got a one tree link thing now. And if you go to eob.center, it points you right to there. So there's a link to Zane there. There's a link to the website Emergence of Being. There's a link. Zane has like a free Zoom call coming up next Tuesday on breathwork. So if you really want to dive deeper into it, the links for registration, everything is at eob.center. So you can go to one place, one link to rule them all, just like Lord of the Rings.
Very cool.
Cool.
The
Yeah,
tech master.
Yeah, and we do have Peggy just saying, hi, Zane. Hello, Peggy. Thank you so much for joining into the broadcast today.
Hi, Peggy.
Cool. So what would you say to either of you if someone really, you already talked about circular breathing, is that where you would really recommend people to kind of start dipping their toes into working, or is it even just throughout the day remembering to breathe at all? Because we do have a tendency to hold our breath so much that part of it, I think, is also just noticing when that happens and start to relax into your normal breath too.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, we just both agree. Starting just with awareness, I think catching yourself when you're not breathing during the day, because you'd be shocked how much that happens throughout your day and you're not even aware of it. Anytime you get nervous, anytime you get anxious, anytime you get stressed because something's about to happen, anytime you're sitting in front of the computer and just like really fixated on something, it's very likely that you will catch yourself going, oh, am I taking really good, wholesome, deep breaths, filling up the whole lung and letting it out? Because another thing that happens is when we do some of this breath work, Zane, maybe you'll comment too, that sometimes people often start and they think they're doing it, but they're not filling the lung all the way up to the tippy top, which I think would be a good thing to really expand that upper lobe. So that would be my thought, where to start with the simple just awarenesses, and you'll quickly build on with, maybe start with the circular breathing. I do a 6-3 breathing, but really starting to catch yourself in the awareness whenever you're like, because of a stress, you've likely been, so catch yourself when you're starting doing those little things. That means you've probably been holding your breath prior to that. So
I notice with my kids playing video games, they'll be all intense on the game, and you see them sitting there holding their breath, they're turning around. It's like, you gotta breathe.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're holding our breath, we're actually putting ourselves into a type of fight or flight response. We're actually, because the body doesn't recognize what's going
Right.
on, what we're actually showing danger. That's what that behavior is. It's a stress action. So then we're releasing all kinds of adrenaline and cortisol, which further keeps us from being able to access those higher states of consciousness, because they get us kind of locked into that lower part of the limbic system, which is anxiety, depression, all those kinds of reactions to life. So if we're really focused and noticing when we're holding our breath, we're entering into a stress stage. So if we can then short circuit that by causing ourselves to breathe consciously again, and it doesn't matter which breath you use, just making yourself breathe again at that moment, you're sending signals to your body to calm down. You are slowing down that production of cortisol and adrenaline, and you're bringing yourself back to a more centered state, which is good at any time.
Great. And for those of you who might just be joining us, we're talking today with Zane Curfman. He's the author of Inka Mountain Magic and has been my teacher on the path of Peruvian shamanism for many, many years now. I can't even remember how long it is that I've known you. So I'm really honored to have him here. When you talk about the altered states of consciousness, I'm curious, like I have binaural beats and sound healing where I can help someone using those to shift from alpha to beta to theta to delta and even layers of those. Are there certain breathing techniques that are good to enter into those specific kind of brave wavelengths?
Absolutely. It's all about a rhythm of breathing and consciousness, though. It's all about you being aware of what's going on. It's not, it's not just the breath alone. A lot of people get that confused. Also, they think just the breathing alone, which can produce all kinds of beneficial effects for us. But it's when you combine that with consciousness technology, when you combine that with a way of thinking during the breath, a way of bringing the energy in, as you were talking about prana. We bring prana into ourselves. A little bit when I give a demonstration, I'll actually show how that works inside of us. But what that lets us do is it allows us to access higher states of ecstatic states, we would call them in shamanism, where we're able to step out of this mundane world and into a more transpersonal world to get a higher metaposition on things. And there was a lot of research in breathing done by a man named Stanislav Grof, who is a psychiatrist from, I believe it was the Ukraine or Russia. And he did research with LSD in the early days and how that worked with the brain. Well, when that was canceled, he had been using certain breath work practices in those sessions, and he just moved completely to the breath work and was creating the same states of being, the same states of consciousness, of course, at a shorter time interval than these psychoactive drugs were creating. And anytime that you can learn to take conscious control of your own chemistry, that you can start to move yourself from one state of consciousness to another, that's always very beneficial in life.
Great. And for people watching, why don't we, like, maybe in another 5 minutes, we can do the breathwork exercise. And that way, if people have questions around that, we have plenty of time to take the conversation in different directions. But if anybody has questions now, we'd love to hear what's on your mind. Uh, Someone was offering, I think this is more specific for childbirth, unless they're talking more in general, but we tend not to breathe during contractions. Any stressor, like we tend to like just tense up and hold our breath. Even if you've ever been in a retail environment where you have someone that's just kind of going crazy on someone, we almost all like it's like this tension in the air, and we have a tension to hold that energy. But I invite everybody to, when you're experiencing things like that, if you can be the one that brings your consciousness back to your breath and intentionally start to breathe. I find with my healing clients that you can mirror the breath and you can actually bring them along with you. And perhaps you could be the catalyst to shift a situation. Even if you have no other tools, simply someone else hearing you breathe, that might even pop the bubble of tension in a situation like that.
Absolutely, because we're all connected.
Yeah, we have Jennifer tapping in saying hello. Hello, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining us. Any other questions? And if not, maybe we'll just jump right into the exercise, or anything coming to mind from either of you that you want to contribute while we see if there's a question and before we move on to a little breath exercise from Zane.
I really just starting everybody to really start with this, because this is really, really important. It seems ridiculous and trivial and small, but it really isn't. You're going to be able to navigate situations in life so much better when you learn to make this more of a habit. I think that's the best way to kind of state it simply. When you find a way to use this to your advantage, even when you're having a business conversation. Like I have clients that are just, they're really involved in their businesses, big companies. And you know, those table discussions can get really tense. You're going to stop breathing there. So I use a little technique where, you know, I do a crossing of the hands and I put tongue to the roof of the mouth, and nobody can see you doing this. Nobody knows what you got going on. You just sit there and breathe. You will be able to hear, you'll be more present, you'll be shocked what starts to happen when you make this a habit, because it starts to ground you. You'll be able to be more present and listen. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it actually does work.
Yep.
So when you can start to create a routine around this and make this a little habit, you don't have to have any tools, any pencils, nothing. You can just sit there and do that. So that's my 2 cents.
And for those of you who don't know, there's a point right behind your teeth on the roof of your mouth where like all these meridians come together, and by putting your tongue to the upper palate, it's kind of activating all these little energy centers. And that's one of the things my meditation teacher would always have us do: standing up straight, head tilted slightly back, tongue to the upper palate, and it really shifted the state. But one thing Dr. K said that maybe it's a question more for Zane, how she said we want to establish these good habits. But oftentimes with these habits is where we are reacting through life instead of responding through life. So it's kind of a paradox. Like we want to have good habits in breathing, but at the same time, we want to be conscious all the time. And if we have a new habit, even if it's a healthier habit, are we then not showing up for our reality? So the question I would pose is, how do we incorporate breath work more, establish good habits without it becoming so routine that we're unconsciously doing them?
Well, the breath is something that's beautiful for that, because when you are becoming aware of the moments when you are holding your breath, moments when you're holding your breath, if you notice those moments in day-to-day life, think about the last time you held your breath when you were trying to solve something. Did you notice that you weren't able to figure it out as easily? Because you're actually going unconscious in those moments. You're actually sending signals to your body of either stress or unconsciousness, and they kind of work hand in hand in one way. So when you start to breathe consciously at that moment, you're actually focusing on breathing, and that brings you back to the now. That brings you back to the place of possibility where you actually can choose something, where you know that you have the power of choice. And that's something that's very beautiful. So anytime you start to notice these constrictions in your day-to-day life and you start to short circuit them, you're becoming more conscious. You're becoming more aware and less reactionary. Think of those moments when you hold your breath. If something comes and disturbs your focus, whatever you're focused on, you react, right? Yeah, there's a bigger reaction than what you should to the stimulus that you're receiving. You're like, whoa, hey, stop. And that's all because you're actually kind of putting yourself in an unhealthy trance state while you're holding your breath. You're focusing so hard that you're actually starting to go unconscious from it.
That's crazy. I'm going to bring up Mark's comment, and I'm going to frame it a little first. He is asking, breathing techniques are very important for an actor, and does Zane have any suggestions to improve on their control? This question's relevant to everyone. And I say that because we all have different hats that we wear in our day-to-day life. Sometimes we have to be the dad, sometimes the friend, sometimes the healer. So though his question's regarding acting because he is an actor, this is something that this answer would be useful to everyone. And just the control of breath. How does that pertain to acting, Mark? I'm just curious, like exactly what do you need to control, like when you're taking a breath? I'm just curious, but anything to speak to on that? I think just any exercise, just starting to become conscious is going to give you that element of control.
Well, the conscious breathing, and especially making sure your breathing is going to produce relaxation. And if you are relaxed, you're going to be able to do your lines better. You're going to be able to remember and stay in character better at those moments. Also, I know that actors do some acting troupes anyway, they do kind of a breathing exercise before they go out. They call it kind of like building a ball of energy. And it's a way for them to release their tension so that when they get out on the stage, they're not so paralyzed. They're not so tense or stressed out, that they can actually be more fluid in what they're doing.
Great. Let's see. Actually, I think that's probably a good spot. Why don't we turn it over to Zane to do a little 5 minute circular breathing? Is it a circular breathing exercise or is it something different?
Yeah, that's what we'll focus on today because it's probably the easiest breath for everyone to kind of connect with. And I'll give like a minute or so of an intro just so people I can do this most effectively. So circular breath is connecting the inhalation and the exhalation. And the way that we want to do that most of the time in day-to-day life, we're focusing on the out breath. When we're stressed or anything, we're focusing on an explosion of energy outward. Also, when we're working out or in martial arts, you realize that if you breathe out with the movement, there's a little more energy, there's a little more strength in your body. So with circular breathing, we're doing something different. We're focusing on the in breath. So the emphasis is while we're pulling in the breath. And the easiest way to make a circular breath is to breathe in before the last bit of air is exhaled. So that's the first thing we want to think about while we're doing this exercise. The second thing is just relaxing. On each out breath, allow your body to become more and more relaxed. And everything else, I'll kind of just tell you as we start. So if you would, wherever you are, lay or sit where you can have a good base for breathing, in kind of a meditation kind of position, spine straight. And you really want your lower stomach, your abdomen to be able to expand fully. So we're just going to take a few practice breaths to begin with. So I want you to just start breathing in through your nose, deep into your stomach, and then high into the chest, and just see how much air you can actually breathe in. And relax as you exhale. And do that about 3 times, just really noticing how much breath can actually be brought into your lungs. Okay, and that's helped us to get all the wrinkles and creases out of our lungs. We're primed for breathing. So once again, we're going to breathe very slowly, inhaling in, and we're going to breathe in and out the same orifice. So if you breathe in your nose, breathe out your nose. If you breathe in your mouth, breathe out your mouth. And we're just going to do this for a few breaths, and you're going to breathe very deeply. Exhale the air, and then right before you're done exhaling all the air, breathe back in, and just try that for a few breaths. Keeping the breath gentle and relaxed. Deep into a relaxed stomach, high into the chest. Breathing in this way, you're actually connecting with nature all around you. You are consciously part of your ecosystem, but all you have to do is breathe. Connecting the inhalation and the exhalation, and relaxing on the exhale. And now I just want you to bring your awareness to any place in your body that is activated, any place in your body where you are noticing a sensation. It might be your hips or your butt sitting in the seat. It might be a pain you have in your foot or your leg or your chest. I want you to focus on that particular spot. And as you breathe in, imagine that the breath is actually coming in through that spot. Your awareness is on connecting the breath and bringing the breath in through whatever area of your body is most activated, that you notice the most. And while you're doing this, just be aware of the subtle sensations within that feeling, whatever it is. If it's a pain, if it's just the pressure of your weight on the chair or the bed, be aware of how that sensation starts to change as you're breathing in through it. We're not looking for big changes, just how, in a subtle way, that vibration starts to change. And you may notice that as you're breathing in this way, that the most intense sensation in your body has just moved to another place in your body. So I just want you to follow the sensation in your body to wherever you're feeling it the most at that moment. Breathe in through it until you feel a sensation stronger in another part of your body, and then breathe in through that sensation. And now let's just increase that breath a little bit. Let's increase it a few points, if you would, or a few beats faster. Still slow, still relaxed, but just where you have to focus on breathing a little bit more. And you do that by cutting off the exhale a little bit sooner. And still focusing on whatever part of your body is most activated and breathing in through it. Imagining the breath is coming in through that part of your body and up into your stomach. And allow whatever wants to happen to happen. Don't try to control it. All you're doing is noticing your breath, being aware of it, keeping it circular, and noticing any sensation in your body and breathing in through it. And now let's speed up our breath just a little bit faster, almost to like a jogging pace. Keeping it circular and breathing in through the strongest sensation in your body, noticing being aware of the shifts in that sensation, and following the strongest sensation around your body, but breathing a little more dynamically. Keeping the sensation the same, keeping the awareness the same, but now we're just going to breathe a little bit faster. Just challenge yourself a little bit with it, kind of like if you were jogging or running or riding a bike. Remember that feeling of riding a bike when you were young and you'd really pump that bike. And just for about the next minute, we're going to breathe in that way while breathing in through the strongest sensation in our body. Keep it strong, keep it strong. Just about 30 seconds more. Almost there. Ten more seconds. And now breathe deep and relax, still connecting the breath. Breathing in through the strongest sensation you feel in or around your body. And imagine what it would be like if you could enjoy the sensation 1% more. So now just imagine what it would feel like to enjoy whatever you're feeling right now 1% more. Breathing in through that feeling of 1% more joy. Letting your breath slow down and return to normal. Slowly opening your eyes if they were shut, noticing 3 things in your room, their shape, their form. Noticing the vibration, the energy around you. What's different from when you started the exercise? How has your consciousness shifted? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zane. Let me bring us all back to the screen. And Willow was just commenting, after breathing, felt more strength to overcome my struggles. Thanks for sharing that. And Willow was kind enough to message me. She was trying to make a comment and couldn't. If you want to make a comment and you're watching on some of the pages, you do either have to head over to YouTube to make a comment so we can see it, or join the Emergence of Being Facebook group. We were just trying to do a better job at regulating comments because we had some trollers and scammers and things in the past. So we're just kind of transitioning to keeping comments in 2 places. So for future broadcasts, if you've been trying to make a comment, we're not trying to ignore you, but just comment in one of those other 2 places. That's amazing. That was way more involved than I thought you were going to give us for like a little taste into breathwork.
Well, I wanted to give everyone a taste of how it can change consciousness and how it can move you and help you as you become aware of your body. As you bring awareness to your body, you're actually bringing spiritual light, is how we see it, to the body, or the awareness of God to the body. And so you're allowing yourself to feel your sensations more. And by doing that, you're bringing more life to those areas. And you're helping to break loose what we would call energetic knots or cellular memories of traumas of the past. And it helps us to actually regulate or move through those constrictions. And you can start to really find out where this stuff is in your body, where you're tight, where you're constricted, and the breath can help you actually relax and release that.
Outstanding. And if anybody, you might all be relaxed so much you don't want to type now, but if anybody wants to make a comment or ask a question, you can certainly do so. I posted a link in the comments to a lot of the pages that there is on Tuesday, Zane is doing just a free Zoom call, which is going to be all like maybe a short introduction, but it's going to be a lot more of these types of exercises. So if you want to have a little bit of a deeper experience with that, I posted the link. You can sign up, or if you go to eob.center, the links for everything are there, including for the Zoom next Tuesday. You do need to register. If you're not going to be available Tuesday, replay will be available, but you do need to register for the Zoom in order to have access to that. So, but thank you so much. Let me share too, my first experience with Zane and breathing. Oh my goodness. It was during the apprenticeship program. And it was like the first weekend after we did the first part of what's called the Hatan Karpai. And he does this one breathing exercise where you're doing these mudras, bringing in the light from above, bringing in the light from the earth, and doing like an energetic pump. And it makes the ability to feel energy a lot more tactile. And we did a process opening the what's called the Wiracocha. So I can't speak highly enough where you really start to dive into this. It can also help to increase your ability to sense and feel with things beyond the physical sensations. You can see and hear a little bit more like a mediumistic in a way, but not mediumistic, just a broader spectrum of awareness, I would say.
Absolutely. And that's what the larger course, the 6-week course, is all about, is how we can use the breath as our primary tool for spiritual development. It's not just going to be circular breathing. We're going to use different types of breathing, because when you also put a pause in between the breath, that creates a certain type of flow of energy within you and changes the way your awareness works. So each one of these breathing techniques, and I've learned them from all over, from Kundalini yoga, from pranayama, from the Andes, where there is a rich tradition of breath work there. And also contemporary breath work like rebirthing, vivation, those type of things. I've learned these techniques from all over and how they all shift the way our consciousness works. So we'll be using those shifts to actually anchor the spiritual development that we'll be going through.
Yeah, and I think over the years I probably have had like a dozen different things, and they really kind of fit. From my point of view, whatever's going on in the class, you kind of pick whatever is needed to kind of create the greatest possibility for everyone. This might be more of a question for Dr. K. I'm not sure. We have Mark asking that he tends to have poor posture, and can that impact breathing? And I think before we go to you, that it certainly can, and it would be really important to be in as best of posture as possible. And if you can't be in a good posture the whole time, keep it as long as possible. Maybe work with some other tools or exercises to build stamina to be able to hold a posture for longer and longer. Like meditation, like being in that same position can be really daunting for some people. But if you just start with a small practice, even a couple minutes, you can build that up over time.
Yeah, so when we hunch over, that's there's a physiological component to it, and there's also an energetic component. So physiologically, if we're not exercising, we don't have good core strength, we don't have good strong back muscles, that can cause us to kind of hunch over. But the other thing that happens when we hunch over is it's a protective, it's almost, we feel we need to protect something within. So you find people kind of doing this thing. And over time, you see the older ladies that are like with their cane and they're hunched over. That's protection of the solar plexus. There's this need to kind of protect. So I recommend, just for starting, things you can do on your own is always catch yourself and put that back straight. And like Hank said, just start to strengthen yourself. Now, would it be good for you? Maybe see a chiropractor, maybe see a physical therapist, or even a trainer to try to get some of those back muscles, core muscles strengthened so that it's easier for you to hold that position for a longer period of time. That may be beneficial. But where you can start on your own, yes, is to just, arch your back, stick your chest up, and just stand straight. And yes, you'll be able to breathe better then, because when you're like this, it is very difficult to expand the diaphragm and take that full breath all the way through your lungs. So put your back up straight for as long as you can, and let's work on strengthening. If it's a back issue, it's very likely, maybe in your case, Mark, where you need to do some exercising and just strengthen that core, strengthen the back muscles, and get exercises. Just body needs to stay in motion, and we get stagnant when we sit around. So yep. any of us. So getting around, moving a little bit. People that are at the computer all the time, we have jobs where they're sitting all the time. Even Telex says they have their people get up like every 45 minutes. Their bell rings so that they get up and move around, because we start to do this when we're at a job where we're on the computer all the time. Yeah. Sitting on a Bosu ball, that's another great way to strengthen the back instead of a chair. That's a tip.
Yeah, I would probably fall over by accident, though. But there was this old game show called To Tell the Truth, and they had one of the guests on there once. They had developed a whole exercise routine around people that are at a desk job, exercises that could all be done at a chair without really lifting up, and a lot of it was just flexing the muscles and things like that. And that it can be something as easy as that, but the important thing is to start. And Dr. K and I talk about it often, that 51% rule. You just need to want it more than you don't. And if you want it more than you don't, you're going to start making the choices that are going to create more lightness, more possibility. Andrew was offering this comment that was cool. After the breathing, I found myself acutely aware of not only the body, but the area a few feet away from my body. And that was my experience with some of Zane's work too. It created this more tactile feeling of what we call in our tradition, the popbo, the bubble, or the auric field, which is a cool thing. Can you speak a little bit more about that, Zane? Like what else might people be aware of if they really start doing these breathing practices? What other sensory perceptions might they start shifting into?
Well, it really brings us into what we call heart-centered consciousness in New Age and spiritual lingo, but that's actually the higher brain functions. We're moving up into a higher ability to work, and we're releasing bliss hormones and bliss chemicals. Serotonin is being deployed, and serotonin can be changed in the pineal gland into chemical that is pretty much the same as DMT or dimethyltryptamine. So we can actually enter into those visionary states. And it also helps with contacting what we call spirit guides. After doing breath work like this, and we'll be doing this in the longer class, the 6-week program, you actually can then slow down and listen and get your intuition. Really, you're clearing your intuition and your impulse, so that because it's filled with all this fear, it's filled with all these stress hormones and all these recurring thoughts that are running through your head. And after doing a session of breathing, all of that is quieted down, and now you can listen to your higher intuition. You can get you can receive inspiration and creativity that you would never thought you could before, and you can actually be in more contact with the spirit world. Some people who are mediums, I've trained them to do this so that they are able to bring through more clear messages. Because anything that is running inside of us is taking up processing power. The mind only has so much processing power, and if it's going around a loop of stress or a constriction within us, that's what's going to present in the reading. That's what's going to present to the person you're working with. So you really want to clear your instrument, and breathing this way really helps to clear out all that etheric, emotional, and mental debris that is just causing feedback loops within your own consciousness.
Yeah, and just to add too, if you're a healer or a reader or anything like that, when I worked in banking, I had 10 years with Bank of America, formerly MBNA, and I was very empathic. And even the people I would talk to on the phone, I would get overwhelmed at the things I was aware of. And through developing a practice of breath work and meditation and that type of thing, it took the edge off. It became like a space where you could be aware of stuff, but it wasn't necessarily sticking to you, because you're getting a lot more awareness and consciousness and realizing that none of that crap is mine. I don't have to take it on. And breath giving you this awareness and knowing what's what is an instrumental tool in not taking on other people's stuff. At least that was my experience with that. Let's see. Any other questions, comments? We're at just after the 50-minute mark, so we always look to wrap up before the hour so we get to upload this wonderful stuff to Instagram, TV, and everything like that. So if you have any questions or comments, now is the time to make them. And as a reminder, if you're watching this on some of the Facebook pages, head over to the YouTube channel or to the Emergence of Being Facebook group. We're transitioning to interacting with just the comments there. So just keep that in mind. We're not trying to ignore you if you're making comments and we don't see them. Not everything's rolling through to the studio. Felix was offering, yes, I also felt completely cleared out. There was no heaviness anywhere in my being. The only thing I could feel was deep, spacious peace for more power than I've ever felt before. That is amazing. Thank you so much for contributing that. Leela was asking, when does the breath class start? I know that the Zoom is February 16th. That's like a free 1 hour, kind of a deeper introduction, deeper dive into the work. The other class, I posted a link for it just now. I forget when that starts. I have to look. Zane probably remembers.
I don't actually. Those are the things that I am not the best with, keeping track of time and all that. I always leave that up to you. So
yeah, and I did have it on the site. It's February 16th, and that's going to be 6 weeks of like more work that builds on each other, and probably homework involved to do in between the weeks and things like that. Any series with Zane is at a whether it's hoodoo shamanism, breath work, or whatever he has going on, I have found that it's always transformative, and it's way more than just a class. It's stuff that you can really use and build on throughout, your day-to-day life, and really respond instead of react to things. But thank you, Will, for the question. But if you don't know if you want to commit to 6 weeks, start with the Zoom next Tuesday. That is a great way to take a little deeper dive. And we're also about just giving the content and being able to provide tools for people who aren't necessarily called yet. That could be a great stepping stone to one day wanting to take a deeper dive into it. My first real deep dive was doing a 4-weekend meditation retreat called the 100th Monkey, where we rotated between studying the Bhagavad Gita, yoga, breathing, and 2-hour rounds of meditation, doing transcendental meditation. And the combination was great, because even the yoga is starting to support different muscles building and things like that, so you can hold these meditative poses and do the breath work for longer and intense periods. Oh, Mark, he had to get one. I respect you, Mark, because usually he's making wisecracks through the whole thing, but when we have a guest, he typically behaves himself to the end. But Mark was saying, I make balloon animals. This is harmful to blow up those balloon animals. Oh, Mark, you little silly guy. I love you. It's only harmful if you're a vegan, maybe. I don't know. Did the animal suffer? No, actually, I would say that blowing those types of balloons up are actually probably a good muscle builder because those balloons are so tight to blow up. You'll notice that professional balloon animal makers. See, Mark, you made a joke, but I'm turning it into a real valid teaching point. Like you see them, they're using those pumps to blow them up because they're so tight. So if you're sitting there and you're blowing those balloons up, you're actually doing a service to your lungs because you're starting to build better lung capacity and better lungs have muscles. I don't know, but you're building up that ability to hold more breath by doing those things. So there, Mark, I turned your joke into an actual thing. Any other questions, comments, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. Any other comments or questions for Zane while we have them? And hopefully, when we have other relevant topics, hopefully you'll agree to come back on and we can dive deeper.
Oh, I would love to. Absolutely, I would love to.
Oh, actually, why don't we shift a question to Dr. K for people who aren't into spirituality at all? We kind of started with the physiological benefits, like even if you're not going to want to feel other things, like what is it doing for the body if you start developing, like if you committed to the practice we just did with Zane, what is that going to end up doing for the body and the physiology?
Well, in general, it's going to expand your lungs and balance out your CO2. It's just kind of like we talked about in the beginning. When you have too much CO2 buildup, it creates acidity, and acidity predisposes you to diseases. That's the quickest way I can kind of put it with the time that we have. But it's just a basic thing. So if you've ever you've had family members in the hospital and they've had a lung surgery or something like that, they have the little sphygmometers and you breathe into them and then they show you how much breath, they're getting you to build your lungs up because you've been laying in bed for so long. So that's not good for you. So they want to measure how your lungs are working and your capacity of your lungs. So this is just a simple way of exercising your lungs and getting more oxygen all the way through, because oxygen is important for your whole body. Just think of it that way. No organ in your system can work without oxygen. If you don't have enough oxygen reaching your cells, your organs are suffering. So it behooves you to take the deep breath all the way up to the tippy top of your lungs so that all your alveoli can grab it, get it into your blood, and that whole process can happen, and you're getting full oxygenation to all of your organs.
Ooh, like all that doctor talk at the end. I was like, I don't know what those words are, but they sound cool. And kind of my wrap up thought is that the breath is something that brings congruency to the body, mind, and spirit. It's what kind of combines us in this reality. And it's so important because oftentimes you might be flighty out in the clouds somewhere, your spirit self or whatnot. Breathing brings you back and it creates this congruency. And that congruency is where you really have what Zane referred to earlier as that space of possibility where you have your choice. And so breath is great for that. Any final thought, Zane, that you want to leave everyone with?
I think you just said it great, man. I mean, I wouldn't know what to conclude it with other than, anytime you think life has just gotten down or you feel depressed or anxious, remember to breathe, because a new possibility is just a breath away if you actually take it.
I like that. A new possibility is just a breath away. But thank you, everyone. We're going to wrap here so we can upload this, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.